it's more based on my personal experience and my experience in engagement with other scholars, right? Okay. Yeah. So, and maybe to also to talk about a little bit on that, that for scholars who are at different stages of their PhD currently, right? For some of you this might be slightly repetitive, and for young scholars who are just starting the PhD, I hope this will be highly useful. So but overall I believe that there would be some key takeaway from this particular session. All right, so I'll share the slides right now. Well, okay, are the slides visible? Are the slides visible?
Yes.
I just want to, yeah, okay. All right, okay. So yeah, so I think we've had that introduction already. Now we'll move to the formal part, right? So the idea on writing data, it's more about using data in academic research, as you already know, right? Okay. Now this will be the broader outline of the session today. I will start with academic research as a background to data engagement. Now you're not using data. In an empty space. You'll be using it in the background of academic research, whichever subject that you are looking at. Okay. Maybe I have to also make one more smaller disclaimer that I am as you know, I'm from economics background and particularly from trade background. So I'll be dealing with databases, but then I'll not be dealing with databases specifically, like the set of databases, but then I try to give examples as possible wherever required, and somehow, for easy explanation, the examples are mostly from trade background. So please bear with me on that. But I try to make it as elaborate as possible so that everyone is able to follow it in the proper way. Okay, coming back to this. So for the first part of the presentation would be on academic research as a background to data engagement, as I already mentioned. Now it's here I would like to focus on the importance of review of literature and the difference between review and a summary. So something that is once again very essential. Now the second part would be the main focus of our discussion today, the data for academic research here. Now it's one thing that what the theory says, for any matter, for any subject, that what the theory says is one thing, and it's usually different when the kind of real life data that you experience would would have some difference. So we try to synthesize, we try to bring a coherence between the two, and how to present it in the in an academic in an academic research domain would be what we would be focusing on. Okay. Now the third part is I thought one thing that I initially struggled with in the earlier years of my PhD, struggled with the writing some certain writing tips. So I thought the same kind of struggle that I had probably shouldn't have for the younger generation of research scholars. So I thought of including some writing tips and all. So the writing tips are largely followed what I follow, and obviously once again there are multiple possibilities of this sort, and then you can always customize it your way. But then one thing I can assure you is that whatever I am discussing here, and then if you follow that, you will we'll make a good presentation for sure. Good presentation, good manuscript, good abstract, good title. So all those things will certainly follow from that. That much assurance I can make. Okay, so having said that, moving to the first part, that is on academic research, right? So the aim of the research, I would like to discuss it at two levels. One is the personal level, that you're not doing research for nothing. You're not doing research without any purpose. So the objective of your research, not in terms of the research question that I'm talking about, largely, from a larger perspective, the aim of research is that advancement in knowledge on a personal level, let's say advancement in knowledge, which will eventually lead to your better intellectual and cognitive capacity. So this is more like a personal improvement as a human being, as a research scholar, as a professional. Now this is one on the personal side. Now this also certainly has a larger picture, larger application here. Like by engaging in research particularly in social sciences, you're expected to contribute to the society, develop it, economically, politically, and socially with whatever applications of the research that you have in all possible ways in the daily life. Right. Yeah. So this is largely the aim of research. Everything comes under this, this kind of a banner. Right. Okay. So the kind of research that you are doing in one way or the other will contribute to your personal development, and also the some of the, addressing some of the larger issues in the society. Fine. Okay. Okay. Now coming to the main aspect, that is pooling literature to review. Now, if you look at it, I have not given a title like review of literature. So this is where I wanted to focus that. So, but then once again, formally coming to that, before formally coming to the pooling of literature part, I would like to mention the research area and domain, of course. So once again, this is going to be slightly repetitive for or probably relevant for the scholars who are at that advanced stage of their research already, who already have a research area and domain in their place and then started writing and all. But anyway, nevertheless, this is I feel still this is important. Right. Okay. So obviously the first step is always to identify a research area that interests you. Right. It's more like what is the area of your interest. It's not necessarily should be a fancy one. Now I've seen this kind of a trend in various institutions that, okay, so you are a larger crowd is following certain ideology or certain kind of research areas, and okay, so I will also have to follow this way. No, that's not the way. That's not the right way of doing it. Well, you might do a good research, you might eventually end up with a good PhD, but then ask yourself, will you be satisfied with that or not? So it's a research area, it's a research domain that you want to pursue on your own, right? It's so necessarily it should be something that interests you, but at the same time, when you're choosing a research area, make it a feasible one, that given the term, the time bound nature of PhD or any research, uh, ideally you should have a feasible one, something that can be done within a certain specified time. Right. Also, when you're choosing a research domain or a larger research area, consider that it has a scope of, for let's say, for another 5 years, right? So that it has something to offer you, and then you also have something to contribute to that. Like if it's a research area that is already exploited or exhausted to the extent possible, it may not have anything to offer you much, right? Ideally, it would be always good that when you choose a research area, something that offers you something that has some meat that comes out of it for the next 5 or 6 years, so that you would also grow as a budding researcher. Right. Okay. So now, how the research area or the domain will be determined, how it is chosen, and all it can either come from the theory that you are learning back in your masters or undergrad level at any other point in your academic career, or also from a related empirical observation. So whichever ignites you towards certain research area is all completely up to you. But then largely these are the two sources that the research area would originate from. Fine. Okay. Having said that, assuming that you already have a research area, we'll go to the polling literature part. Now, okay. Once you, for example, now if you have your research area is explaining. Sorry to give the example from economics once again, but yeah. So suppose it is on the relationship between trade and economic growth. You can have n number of articles. You can have hundreds and thousands of articles on the same topic, and if you write a summary of one article, and then if you keep writing the summary of say a set of articles, and then arrange them in a chronological order, by the year of which they are published, this would be one way of doing it. Slightly older way, slightly traditional way of polling the literature would be arranging them simply in a chronological manner. Now, the second or the most appropriate way of doing it, what I personally also feel, that okay, you have a larger research domain. Once again, we talked about the relationship between trade and economic growth. Now, there are multiple themes that are arising within that, right? So you can also consider the within the trade and economic growth domain, you can also consider, okay, what kind of relationship is there between exports and growth, imports and growth, and several other trade policies and growth. This kind of thematic analysis is equally important. And then you can classify the entire set of articles that you have and then thematically arrange them and then make it a chronological pooling. That will be much more effective. Okay, so this is another way of doing it. So I would personally suggest that the second way, that the thematically chronological way of pooling literature would be the ideal one for an effective research, particularly effective review of literature. Now, this would be slightly different in the case of thesis and manuscript writing. So manuscript here, I'm talking about a potential journal article from all of you. Of course, some of you might have already published some articles, and some are in the process of publishing. Some are just submitted. Everything is possible, but all of you will do either both of this, thesis writing and manuscript writing, at some point in time. Right? Okay. So thesis writing would, the essential difference is that the crowd that you are addressing would be different. So manuscript writing, you are not, you are addressing a crowd of journal editors and sort of experts in your area, right? And another set would be budding research scholars in this area. Now that is one side. So and also the expected volume of the review of literature or the pooling of literature would be slightly lesser in manuscript writing compared to when it comes to thesis, because the expected audiences or the target audience is different. Your supervisor, the doctoral committee members, and also the external examiners who is expectedly an expert in the area, right? And then he or she would be the one that is evaluating your thesis. So this kind of difference should be kept in mind, that the quantity or the volume of literature that you are writing would be different for thesis and manuscript, right? But then essentially the thematically chronological pooling would be ideal for both. Okay. Now, but then most important thing is that do a review and not a summary. Right. Okay. So here we can look at it slightly in a diagrammatic fashion. Okay. So suppose this is a summary that you are essentially writing of one article. Okay. So you read one article, and then whatever you understood out of it, you just written, say, 50 to 100 words or even 200 words about that. Now that is one article, summary of one article. Now if you repeat that for, say, another 10 to 20 or even 30 articles, you have a larger pool of summary. Now this is not enough. This is not a review of literature here. Okay, it's just a summary of literature, not a review. Now, what makes it a review is what we're going to look at here. Okay, let's say there are three types of possible articles that you would focus or you would frequently come across. Now, a set of art, once again in the case of trade and economic growth, that example to continue, you may have a set of studies which will tell you that, okay, trade has some positive effect on economic growth. Now, this would be true for certain studies. Now, if you take another set, it can have mixed result, or some challenging studies could be there, that okay, this for a particular sample it might be true, but for a different sample it might be completely you may not be getting the similar results. Now it can go to the challenging studies can go to another extent, another level, that it can also bring out completely opposite results. Right. So somewhere you would say that trade can have a positive result on economic growth. At the same time, you can also have certain studies stating that trade can have a negative result, negative effect on economic growth. Now, this is all possible empirically. Looking at the actual the kind of articles that are coming up, you will see a mixture of all this. Now, pooling them together and then comparing and contrasting will bring you half the way, right? Okay, half of the review of literature would be done on that. Okay, you've taken all possibilities. Like, you're not only considered studies that are supporting the view, you're also considering studies that are challenging and even refuting the basic research question that you have. Now, why your research question still is important is what makes your literature review unique. Okay, so that will be your addition, your observation on why is my research question important and why is my research question relevant in this context, despite having a set of studies that are opposite or even challenging the existing, challenging the kind of research question that you have in your mind. Now, this will give you a good review of literature, because you are not only that you are summarizing, you're comparing and contrasting all the multiple themes within the literature, multiple multiple results within the literature. You're getting some mixed results somewhere. You're getting positive, you're getting negative, everything you're covering, and then you are making your own observation. Okay, certain things are missing in the literature or certain things are lacking, and that would be the one that give you a good review of literature. So here, why I am talking about review of literature specifically, and one is to churn out the difference between review and a summary. I hope this is clear now. Now the other is to also talk about the kind of research question that you have, or the kind of research question that originates will come from the review of literature. Okay, going back to the previous slide once more, there are 2 points that you talk about here. Uh, okay, yeah. So first one is, once again, so having said that, if you have a good review of literature, it will automatically come out that you will have a certain, you will develop a certain, set of research questions out of it. So largely in the context of academic research, it will come out as a research gap. Okay, so it would ideally, it should come as a statement with a question mark. Okay, that would be the ideal one, but not necessary that everybody will get it on time. Right? It's always a cumulative process. It will happen at some point in time. It will come out. Fine. Okay. Now, because why is this important is that the nature of the research question, the validity of the research question, the feasibility given the time boundedness, and also the novelty of research question will define the kind of data that you are applying. Okay, so that is the reason why I try to focus on this once more, right? So from that review of literature part, you move ahead to the formation of the research question, or the making the research gap into a question format. Now, fine. The last step in this particular part of polling literature for review would be testing the whatever research question that you have, testing it in a theoretical or an empirical manner. Now, you can do what you can do is to develop a theoretical model in terms of analyzing the research question and end it there. Earlier the researchers used to do that. Now also it is also a practice that, okay, you can develop a theoretical model, and then often you use certain data to validate the model empirically. This is why I said the theory would say one thing, and the kind of empirical data that you experience would tell you something else. So to validate that your model is correct, you need some data. That's the reason why I mentioned here. Okay, so that's more like the importance of polling literature to review and not summarize, and that the review is what gives you a set of research questions that can be further tested using data. Fine. Okay. Now moving ahead, okay, we've done this. Now, yeah, the other important part in the first part is the first part of academic research is that the methodology and method. Right, to start with the difference between the two is I think the most important one. Often it is misunderstood that methodology and method are the same. No, research methodology is never the same as a research method. It is always different, and research methodology is always a theoretical perspective. It's always a theoretical stand with which you're trying to explain a research question. Now, for example, to talk about this once again, an example from economics. So we have had a series of crises in economic crisis in the past 120, 130 years. So starting from 1896, 1930, the Great Depression, 1973, the oil shock, and 2007 and 8, the Great Recession, the most recent one. That has affected the global economy as a whole. Right now, if you're a student of economics, you would the neoclassical school or the orthodox school was largely incapable of explaining the occurrence of the kind of crisis that we had. Right. Okay. Now, okay, if you want to analyze as a young research scholar, if you want to analyze why the crises are occurring, why the crises are frequently occurring over a period of say 30 to 35 years in multiple times in the same century, or even say in a period of 120 to 130 years. Now, probably the neoclassical economics, the orthodox economics, would not be a sufficient, would not be the appropriate platform to start with. In such cases, I'm just giving this as an example. In such cases, you have a Marxian economic tradition which will offer you slightly better methodology, right? Slightly better theoretical stand to explain this or to start analyzing this research question. So that would be, this is the reason why I mentioned research methodology is always a theoretical perspective, always a theoretical stand that will explain a certain research question. I hope it is clear. Now once again, my own personal research is a slightly different case here. So as you already know, I am working largely on international trade and international economic related issues. Now my thesis is on global production sharing, so which is already I think already discussed or I think already announced over there. Now the same phenomenon of production sharing or trade in intermediate goods uh, or outsourcing production to different countries, this can be understood from multiple perspectives. So what I followed was a trade perspective. So that is my research methodology. Now, as you, if you are familiar with the term global value chain, so somebody who does microstructure kind of analysis would follow a theoretical perspective based on value chains. You know, or if you're a production specialist, if you're a production economist, you can also look at it from a production perspective, the firm's perspective, and this will become the terminology will slightly change. It will become international fragmentation of production. So these are terminologies that are essentially are used interchangeably, essentially trying to explain the same thing but from different theoretical standpoints, right? So that the difference in the standpoint is also the difference in the research methodology. Now that's what I wanted to focus once on. Now, what would be the research method then? No, so research method is always a set of qualitative and quantitative tools that will help you find a solution to the question that you have. In most cases, it is done with set of data. So if it's a qualitative or quantitative tools, set of qualitative tools or quantitative tools, you always have multiple methods of doing that, like application of research. Now, particularly in the case of social sciences, you can follow the statistical or econometric methods, or also mathematical or a simulation oriented method. You can the computational methods and all these all will be the research method, not methodology. Okay, I want all of you, I wish all of you uh, agree to that and follow the same in your research as well. So and tell your younger generations as well. So this is the difference is always very, very important, and never methodology is never the same as the method. Okay. Okay. Now choosing the methodology and method, excuse me, choosing the correct methodology and method would also determine the kind of the data that you are looking at, and it also has a reverse nature. Sometimes the nature of data that you are going to handle will define the kind of research method that you have to use. So this is kind of interlinked between interlinked to each other. So the certain data sets would demand, okay, one type of method has to be used because of certain data issues. Now those things are also very important. Now what I say is that coming back to that research methodology part or research method part in particular, the choice of methodology or the method can vary between the can vary across research approaches. So this would once again come out from the school of thought that you largely believe in. Like I said, the orthodox, the neoclassical school, or the whether you want to follow a heterodox school, or within heterodox whether you want to follow a classical system or the Marxian system or a Sraffian system, whichever it is. So whichever that you feel is appealing, that would be the most appropriate one for given the research question that you have. But once again, the key takeaway is that the research methodology and research method would be different, right? Now the reason why is that the choosing them correctly is also essential in terms of using the data. Fine. Yeah. So that is more on the first part of our discussion. I just would like to come back. Is that are we good so far? So far, so good. I can't. Okay. I don't see any response. Okay. Any questions? Anything that you want to raise in this particular part? Okay. Otherwise, okay. Then we'll move ahead. And then if there are questions, we can take it ahead in the towards the end of the discussion. Okay, so the second part would be on data for academic research. Yeah, like I said, one thing I'm not equipped in primary data collection, so I would not be talking about that. Now I have used an array of secondary data sources. So whatever my inference or whatever my inputs would be based largely on the use of secondary data sources, and then but I'm not talking about I'm not going to list out the individual databases or data sources specifically. If you want to have any discussions on that, you can have it after the probably after the session. Now, yeah. So as I said, I've tried to give some examples of databases wherever required. So largely they are somewhere they are trade related databases, so that it was easy for me to formulate it this way. Okay, so starting with some ironical sentences. So something that Ronald Coase said: if you torture the data, long enough, it will confess to anything. Now, and this also said that there are three types of lies, damned lies, and statistics. Now, this is also understood in this way that data can be manipulated in the way that you want to, right? Data can be manipulated in any manner that you want to, and it will give you the kind of result that you are looking for. Whether it is correct or not is not. It's a different question. People do that. I have to say this. That's the reason why these codes have come up. The very reason that people do it is the reason why they have come up. Okay. Now, but the once again, if these are true, right? If data torturing is an actual process that is done, if there are three types of lies and statistics becomes the ranks the top in that, the advice would be that not to torture the data the way you want it to, right? And also not to misuse the data or manipulate the data or even misreport the data to get a meaningful inference. So it's more like an ethical, it's from an ethical point of view that you have to follow this thing, and then you have to take the data as it comes out, and then also you can make changes to the data the way that you can always change the data the way you want to use it, but not torture the data. Like you shouldn't ideally you shouldn't make a lot of manipulations and then okay, finally you come out with some good result. No, that is not done. That's not the right way of doing research. It will come out, it will get exposed at some point in time. Right. Okay. So the misuse of data, unethical, misuse, misreporting, misinterpretation, everything is, So the first thing to follow is not to do any of these, right? And then in that sense, the need for data. Let's talk about it a little bit. So it is more to fill the aim of research that we already discussed, right? In the first part, and to provide sufficient information for timely analysis. So that all that is important. You need sufficient information for appropriate analysis on a timely basis, right? Okay. And then now, yeah, the use of data that is slightly moving away from mere descriptive analysis would be that you use data to bring out some precision and also to minimize the possible errors, right? That's that's the way of looking at it. Now the also to make meaningful and unambiguous inferences. Now the one good thing that you when you have data would be that your inferences are at least evidence based, right? Your inferences will not have any question, or cannot be questioned at prima facie. They cannot be questioned because you have sufficient data supporting that. Now, yeah, so this will be the supplementing part to the aim of research that we already discussed in the first part, right? Okay, so just to talk about the some of the principles of fundamental principles of official statistics by endorsed by the UN Assembly, is that availability of relevant and impartial data for everyone in a democratic society. So this is very important, and that okay, so to understand the functioning of a democratic society, the government, the economy, the polity, the society, everything, almost everything related to the climate, the environment, everything almost related to that. So you need some information, and usually provided in the basis on the in the form of official statistics. So this is one thing that is very important, and it should be equally available to everyone. It should be impartially and equally available to everybody. Now that's one thing. Also to talk about some professional standards and ethics, right? Something that we already talked about. They should follow certain scientific principles and professional ethics or methods on collection, processing, and storage of data, and also the presentation of statistical data. Now they should be transparent and there should not be any misuse. So these are some of the important aspects of principles of official statistics, which I thought would be relevant here, because once again they take you to the conclusion that data should not be misused, number one, and also data should not be data should be transparent, right? Data should be transparent, and it should be equally accessible for everyone, so that you can have a meaningful whatever uh, analysis that you do, you can have meaningful results out of it. Now, well, there are some more principles and all. I'm not going too detail into that, but maybe to talk about the ninth principle, use of international standards. So we talk about databases that are specific to certain countries. We also have databases that are internationally available, reporting different types of data for similar variables, right? So that also happens. And then now it is a case of to have a inter-country comparison, to have some comparison of say for example between India and US, you need to have some standardized way of data collection, classification, and some consistency should be there in the statistical system. So that also I think is important. This is also very, very essential in terms of understanding the kind of data that you're going to use. Okay. Now coming to the formal part of how to use data, or how to start with the data itself, will be well, okay, the type of data and the data sources that you are going to focus on will depend certainly on the research question that you want to address, right? This goes without saying, right? I mean, basically the data that you are going to look at and the related data source should be relevant to your research question. That's the key takeaway from that, right? It's a well, okay. Now, partly the literature that you are referring to will help you understand the availability of databases and then their scope and also the coverage. Okay, so the knowing databases is important, and what is available in the database is also important, and this will come out from the literature. Now, for example, to talk about, if you are somebody who is working on economics and then doing some firm level analysis, for example, once again, some firm level analysis. So if you look at only India's case, you have the CMI Provis database, which provides firm level information for almost all firms within India. So it doesn't tell you anything that is happening outside India. Now, if you want to do a firm level analysis for multiple countries, you have to resort to a different database. For example, I think you have the World Bank Enterprise Survey, which will give you firm level database for a cross country level, right? Firm level database for cross country analysis. Now, this is what I said. The knowing that database that you want to use and their scope and their coverage of information is essentially important, and only when you can collect the appropriate data, right? Okay. Now, one thing to keep in your mind is that the data would be classified in multiple, would be arranged in multiple classifications for various purposes. So this is also equally important, that what kind of data that you want to look at, and even from suppose once again the database that you're going to refer to, and then that particular database may have data arranged in different manner for different purposes, so that purpose also should be understood here. Now, to churn out this further a little bit, to talk about the example of trade data again. Now, you have some aggregate trade data on aggregate exports, imports, all those things you have available from the World Bank or the IMF databases. Now, at the same time, you have more sophisticated databases available at the product level. Now, what are the kind of products that are traded between a set of countries, or multiple countries over the period of years? All those things are largely available in UN Comtrade data, the Commodity Trade Statistics database, which has multiple classifications of the same data, right? So one will be the standard industrial trade classification, that is the product level data, that is accounted in terms of simple exports and imports. Now, there is also a harmonious system classification, and then you have various rounds of this data. So every year, or not every year, periodically this keeps changing. the contents of these databases also keep changing. Now, the harmonious system would be something that tells you largely on the tariff lines. Now, the product level data devised for the purpose of imposing or analyzing tariffs. Now, once again, I keep saying this, that it's a the purpose by which data would be used also determines the kind of classification that the data undergoes. Now, the why it is important is that, once again, depending on your resource question, if you want to do the product level database, you have to look at a database that provides you with a product level database, not looking at the data, not looking at any database that is at the aggregate level, right? No, there is no use if you go to the standard industrial trade classification kind of data if you want to analyze tariffs, right? You necessarily have to go to the harmonious system database. So I know that this might be slightly easier for the economic students, and not for the other social science students who are present in the hall. But to tell you that the kind of data availability or the kind of data classification would also, or what you want to access, the kind of data that you want to collect for your research will depend on the kind of research question that you have. But then there are multiple types of databases, multiple types of data classifications available in the in the entire academic domain. So which one you use is completely up to you. Now, why, once again, so if you have, suppose you are choosing your research question is well defined, and then you are already decided, okay, certain databases that you're going to follow. Now, you may have data available only from, say, not necessarily from one particular source, one particular database. You may have to sometimes look into two different databases and then club the data together, make them their comparable, make them their correspondent. And what in the language of academic research, this is called as concordance. Okay, so concordance of data or compatibility of data would be essentially important here. Now, this is essentially done into at two levels. One is comparing the data from two different databases, right? That's one thing I already talked about. Now, it's also possible that you are comparing two versions of the same data, right? Now, for example, India's case, if you are looking at the let's say the national industrial classification data, that tells you the industry level industry level data for, say, Indian industries, in particular industry level information, right? So this has multiple rounds of data, or multiple rounds of data collection, right? The most so you will have the most recent one being, I think, 2012 or something, or, and then you had previous versions. So if you want to have data for longer time period, you might have to collect data from multiple rounds and then make sure that their concordance is correct, right? So, okay, now the concordance would be important because this is also to ensure that you're not missing any information. The concordance would be that the one product, one variable, or one piece of information that is listed in the earlier version is available and is measurable in the second version or in the latest version. So this kind of compatibility has to be made sure. So these are some of the important aspect. Now also to focus on the timeliness of data, whether the data is available available with a lag, or whether the data is not accessible or not. Now, once again, if you have this classic example of census data that comes out as a census data as an easy example here. So the timeliness of data is always under question. It comes out only once in 10 years, and then your analysis gets outdated with as you move towards the next census. Like, so 2011 being the if you use the data from 2011 census, and then you're already in 2021 or in 22, and then now it becomes that data is slightly outdated. You need to wait for the next round to come out with better data, the most recent data. Okay. Now, the other important aspect is that to also understand that there is periodic updation of data that happens. Now, whichever database that you're looking at, they would have periodic updation of data on multiple levels. Now, for example, if you look at the World Development Indicators at the World Bank database, they keep changing the the base year of their analysis. They keep changing it for say 5 years. They keep the certain base year and then use it further. Now, the periodic update. Excuse me. Any doubts in that? Okay. I heard someone saying something. I thought it was a doubt. Okay. Yeah. So periodic updation of data once again is important. As I said, in terms of the data classifications and all. So for example, once again, if you look at the harmonious system or the SITC, Standard Industrial Trade Classification Database, uh, or the data classification, say one product might be listed there. Now in the second round of round of data collection, that particular product might not be there, right? That particular product might be clubbed with something else, or might not be present at all. If you no longer have trade of those commodities, you are not account you don't account for that trade anymore, right? So that particular product might be completely absent. So this kind of periodic updation also happens, and that is also very important when you're trying to collect data, right? So this data, the periodic updation would be, I think, you can always club the third, fourth, and the sixth point here. That is knowing data classification, concordance of data, and also the periodic updation of data here. That would be of high importance when you're collecting particularly data for over a period of time. Right. Okay. So now, okay, if data collection aspect is somewhere understood, like what are the basic things to be done. You need to you need to be aware of the databases. You need also to be aware of the scope of the data. The classification of data for various purposes, and also the concordance. Now, going ahead, okay, yeah. So just to give that example, now, looking at the table, one can see that there are multiple cells here, right? Now, each cell indicates, the cells that are not blank, essentially, the cell indicates uh, the concordance table between any pair of classifications. So for example, if you take the very first cell, right, it will be the concordance table between SITC revision 4, right? That's why I said there are multiple rounds of data collection. So that would be accounted as revision 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Fine. So HS 2022 would be the latest in harmonious system classification, and SITC revision 4 would be the latest in that classification. So now that particular one, that first cell will tell you the concordance table for that particular pair of data classifications. Now this is true for any cell. Now I just wanted to show you that this data classification would be very specific, very unique between any pair of classifications. So the concordance is very important here. Okay, fine. Now, cleaning and arranging the data would also be equally important. That you when you download or when you access the data from any secondary source, you necessarily have some information that is probably not relevant to your research question, so they have to be removed. Simple as that. Now, the other aspect is that you may have some missing values in the data. Now, whether the missing values are actual statistical error, or are there any error from the data collection, or are they systematic, right? Are they actually zero? Are they actually missing? Are they actually not reported? So if you look at trade data, for example, now you may not have trade between two countries for a particular year. Now that value will necessarily be zero, not a missing value. So that is a systematically reported zero value and not a random error. At the same time, it is also possible that because of the kind of data collection methods that you have, you might be missing data, or sometimes the data might not be available at all. Right, such cases. So whether to decide whether they are systematic or random errors, you also have to be careful on that. Now, if there are missing values, you might have to look into other databases to supplement your data, right, or supplement the missing values. That is where the previous one, the concordance and the collecting data from multiple sources becomes very important. Fine. Now the arrangement of data to suit your purpose. Once you start cleaning the data the way that you want it to be, right? You can convert, transpose the data to suit your purpose, and in more like a ready-to-use format. Now, strictly talking about it, econometric point of view, from an economics perspective, you can use it you can format it in the way that cross-section, or you can also have it in a time series format, also have in a panel format, whichever it is. Whichever turns out to be relevant for you, right? Now, the other important aspect of cleaning is that you can simply plot the data and understand if there are any outliers, right? This is very important because use of data is essentially to predict or estimate the average behavior of the data. Okay, and then certainly the outliers will affect the average. So removing the outliers is the only feasible option, or at least there are scientific methods of removing the outliers, and then that would be the most appropriate way of cleaning the data. So and simply plotting the data in a curve, or just some basic measures of central tendency, or dispersion would actually run. You can actually run them before you formally use the data, right? Such cases would actually tell you the nature of data without having gone in detail into proper statistical analysis. Okay, so so the first step would be to collect the data in and having certain things in your mind, like, okay, so you have to be you also have to understand the scope of data, coverage of data, and also the correspondence between different databases, or the correspondence between different data reporting from multiple years, the concordance in general, and then coming to the cleaning or the arrangement part. Now, removing irrelevant information is one thing, addressing the missing values, and also arranging the data in the format that you want to use. So that would be the larger cleaning and arrangement of data, right? Fine. Okay. Now, using and reporting the data. Finally, it comes down to the use of data and also the reporting of data. Here uh, it is also important that you spend equal time or enough time experiencing this part, using and reporting the data in the scientific and the simplest way possible. Now, one can do, you have set of data, and then you can actually use it to show some basic trends in certain variables. So if you simply want to plot the trade data of certain countries, you can just simply plot it in basic trends, churn out some shares or some share values or growth trends and all. This is one way of doing it. Now, the other possibility is to bring out some stylized facts. You might have come across, some of the economic students, scholars might have come across this term called stylized facts. And why is it different from, or how is it different from basic trends, is what I'm going to talk about in the next sentence. Now, stylized facts would be something that directly take you to your research question or research problem. Okay, so if you use the title stylized facts, you're expected to show some descriptive trends of data, or show some trends of data that will take you to the research question directly, right? Okay, so that is the essential difference, and also to show some summary statistics. Okay, so the simple mean, median, uh, also the standard deviation, minimum, maximum values, and all. This will also give you the kind of the nature of data that you probably want to analyze. And once again, strictly from an econometric point of view, this is in order to make sure that there are no there are no econometric issues, particularly in the form of multicollinearity, right? Even if it is uh, it might be very specific for economic students, but then still, I thought of mentioning this, that you can actually you can actually get out get the correlation tables between the variables that you are going to look at, or variables that you are going to use and in as independent variables. Now, the advice is not to use highly correlated variables as independent variables, because certainly you will have a problem of multicollinearity. So the use of data would go redundant, and also whatever result that you get would be misleading. Now, these are some of the things that one needs to be careful about. Also, well, okay, it is important that you translate the data into a scientific language, but it also should be simple. Now, once again, you are trying to address a crowd that is certainly specialist in your, in the area that you are going to work on. But at the same time, you need to use simple language, also the scientific language. So there's always a good mix of simple and scientific language, which you, for in any standard paper, you would follow. You would find this, and then here is the use of jargons and specialized terms for terms or jargons that are specialized in the area would come into prominence. So this is also equally important, right? It's a simple language should be used, at the same time it should be scientific. Okay, so you cannot write it as a, there is something called an academic language, and that it's always ideal that you have to write it. And now this is also very important in terms of publishing your research, because if your language is not scientific enough, it's good enough a reason that you get rejected. Sometimes desk rejection for your paper. Okay, so here, because always keep in mind that your target audience is always a set of experts in this area. So they would expect you to have the kind of language quality. Your analysis might be really good, but the way you articulate it might not be of the quality that they expect. So always try to improve on that part. That's the reason why I would like to focus that there should be an appropriate mix between the scientific language and the simple version of it. Right. Okay. Now, final part in the use of using and reporting data would be, now once again, if you are using any statistical method that uses estimation techniques, right? You also, not only that the statistical significance has to be reported, it also should be followed by, it also should be aided with the inference that is related to your research question. Right. So many people, many scholars, many papers report that, okay, so there is a statistically significant, effect of one variable on the other. No, that is not enough. What it means in the context of your research question is also important. Right. If it's a economic research, certainly you have to, what it's called a statistical significance. Apart from that, it's also called the economic significance. The economic meaning of that result, or economic meaning of that one single number should also be given in the proper way. Wait, now this will also, yeah. So this will also tell you that there is an equal importance of not only the statistical significance. As I said, it is always a tool, and it can be used anywhere, right? At the same time, there should be a corresponding, it should be equally important that the meaning of that meaning of the statistical significance in your context, in the research question that you are addressing, that is also highly important or equally important. Now, because it will, for example, let's say you have a model that addresses, say, variables that are in log forms, natural log forms. Your interpretation would become of an elasticity. Now, if you have a semi-log model, largely the interpretation would be in terms of growth rate. Now, this has to be corrected. I mean, the reporting has to be correct, because your conclusion, your policy implications, and also, the result that you are telling out the world can change depending on the way of interpretation. That's the reason why I further focus on this. Using and reporting the data would also be equally important. All right. Now, so far I've been talking largely about economics in general, or whatever I talked about. I've given only economics example, but I would like to also extend it to some of the other possibilities of interdisciplinary research. Now, the quantitative tools that we've been talking about, they are largely theoretical. They do not have a theory that is specific to one subject. So that's also the greatest advantage of such tools. They can be applied in multiple areas. So certainly the statistical tools and other tools are, econometric tools are largely used in economics and other quantitative, in the quantitative, all possible quantitative domains of economics and other research areas. At the same time, this is further extended to multiple research areas, including sociology and history and even anthropology. So, for example, to talk about, if you're somebody working in sociological research, and then you are engaged in migration related aspects. So there is this entire gamut of models called count data models that can be extensively used for the meaningful research, right? You not necessarily have to look at it only from a descriptive point of view. You can always aid it with data and corresponding estimation methods. Now, so is the case for economic history, or largely in history. Cliometrics is a branch of quantitative tool, or a set of quantitative tools that will help you understand history from a data perspective. So these are some of the possible extensions of data in interdisciplinary research. So certainly that a lot of a lot of interdisciplinary research is happening in these areas, with the use of, even in political science also, several of the econometric models that are frequently used in economics alone, they are much more common in political science as well. So that's also the aspect of data and its application in academic research. So yeah, now okay, once again I come back to you. Is there anything so far, anything that you want to any doubts or anything that you want to discuss? Yeah, I see one name. Okay, Shubham Kumar Singh is the name. Yeah. So what is it? Is the so how do we how do we interact? What's the
Shubham, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and then ask the
Yes, ma'am.
question.
or
Sir, am I
either
audible?
yeah, you are.
Sir, what I was asking is that you have mentioned that when we will be collecting the data, we must
Mm-hmm.
know the uh, database and their scope.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So please, can you please elaborate on this point?
Okay, sure. So, okay. So, how could this, Shubham?
Sir, one more
Since it's
question
a
is
yeah,
between choosing methodology and method, sir. Please elaborate on methodology part also, sir.
yeah, sure. Okay. So, how about does anyone else have this similar question? Okay. So, how about this, Shubham? We'll do one thing then. So, since I think this question needs some attention. So, how about we keep it for the end of the session then?
Yes, sir. Sure,
Yeah.
sir. It would be fine.
Okay. So then we'll do one thing. We'll move to the third part, and then we'll look at it in detail after that. In the proper question and answer session. So unless it's so because your question needs some more time. That's why. Okay.
Okay, sir.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
All right. Okay. Now this is the third part. That's the last part um, in this presentation for today, right? It's the aspect on writing tips. Now, once again, this is all my personal understanding and also my personal engagement with other scholars. So I've tried to compile it one by one. That is, now I'm starting it with the manuscript itself. Okay, so assuming that you are going to write a paper and then submitting it in a reputed journal. So here, what is expected, right? It's that's what I'm going to mention here. So as I said, if you follow this method, I assure you that you will not have any problem. Whether your paper will get accepted or not is a different issue, but then you will not have any problem of uh, because I would say that I'm confident enough that this is a successful method because I have followed this method and published various research papers. Well, obviously you will have to customize it on your way, one thing, and also to suit the requirements of the journal, whichever journal that you are going to look at. But otherwise generally these things will follow this one. Okay. So here, to start with, for a manuscript, you always have to have the motivation for the research topic. Essentially, the introductory part will have the motivation for your research topic slightly in detail, right? And also followed by a set of review of literature, brief review of literature, not a detailed one, And the towards the last part of introduction, you will also discuss like what are the major findings that your your research has. But and this is once again, this is largely from economics perspective, but obviously I'm pretty sure that there is some connection between some pattern, that is some similar pattern that you can observe in other social sciences as well, and also the organization of your paper, how you organize the rest of the paper. So this would be one pattern that you could follow. Now if the second section is on specifically on review of literature, as I said, it should not be a summary, it's always a review, that which I will show from my own paper in the next coming couple of slides. Now the way you can do it, you can actually bring it out as a separate section is one option, or it is possible modern days to save the space of the journal, the journal publication, you also do it as a part of introduction. So instead of briefing the review of literature, you can briefing the literature, you can always have a slightly detailed review of literature in the introductory part itself, now which is followed always by the main body and the discussion of your findings, whichever method that you are using, like the wherever the data application or all the all possible ways of analyzing your analyzing the results, and then having discussions on the results, and cementing the validity of the results, what we call as robustness checks from an econometric point of view. So all those things would come in the third part, and then concluding remarks should have a brief summary. Once again, here the summary would be important, the summary of your research plus some of the policy implications that the research will have, right? And also you can once again, the modern way of doing it is that you can also mention some possible extensions of your current research. So something that I have not mentioned here is the extension summary plus policy implications, also some possible extensions of your research, right? Possible extensions of your current research. Now as I said, it could be that you might be doing some data research on your aggregate trade data analysis, and then you have certain conclusions. You mentioned that it might have it might have relevant policy implications, you can make some policy suggestions on that. And the extensions of possible research would be for future would be, okay, you are using aggregate data currently, now this will have you can always extend it to product level data or disaggregated data. So to just to say what could be the way of writing possible extensions of research, as just as an example. Now what is important here is that there should be this is something, it might seem very basic, it might seem very commonsensical, but it's also something that is often missing, right? There should always be a connecting sentence for each section. Between two sections, there should always be a connecting sentence. Now, from one section, from the introductory section, you should say that, or from review of literature section, or from data section to the results section, you should always take you should always take the reader from this section to the other. You should make sure that there is a connecting sentence. Otherwise, it becomes two separate paragraphs without any necessary connection, and the reader is not responsible for making the connection that you expect him to have. Fine. So this is also very important. Once again, as I said, it might seem very basic, but it's equally important, right? Connecting sentences for each section, as I said, and this is also preferred to have the kind of connection that is also expected within paragraphs as well. So if you have two paragraphs or three paragraphs, they should also be connected. There should be a continuity of that. That's what I was trying to say here. Now, sending it to the right audience. Okay, once you have the manuscript ready, that is designed in the way that is ready to submit. But you also have to target the journal or target the audience that you are looking. You want to focus. So how do you choose the correct audience? How do you choose the journal? Is another question. Now, one way of looking at is which are the articles that you are reading, and which all journals that they are published in. That is one way of looking at it. From the references that you already have, the articles that you already refer to, you get a list of good journals where you can publish your article. Now that is one thing. Second is to always look at some potential journals, or it's ideal that if when you have a manuscript, it's always good to have 2 or 3 targeted journals in your mind, right? And then depending on the importance of or depending on the importance that you give it, to them. You can choose whichever one to submit it to at the earliest, and then also keep a track of their, whether your article fits the aim and the scope of that particular journal, right? If it doesn't, you will get a desk rejection, simple as that, right? And it's also sometimes we send it to the wrong journal and then get it rejected, and certainly rejection at any level in academics or in personal life, rejection is not good at all, right? But then yeah, so that sense, choose the right journal, target the right audience, and then getting making a list of journals will always help you do this, and then keep a track of their aim, or the scope of the journal. And sometimes the scope of the journal, or the larger scope of the journal might not be changing, but the current focus might be changing over a period of say 6 to 7 months. So that also should be taken into account. Okay, so these are some of the certain aspects of sending a manuscript. Now, why I started with the manuscript is that the first thing that you have to do in submitting a journal is to write a manuscript itself, not writing the abstract or not writing the title. The title writing would actually come at the last of it. Okay, so now if you're writing an abstract, let's say ideally, once again, depending on the journal's requirements, but ideally it should be between 80 to 120 words. That will make a good abstract. Now, what all should be the content of the abstract? Now, the essence of the paper, whatever research that you are doing, and then your sample, your year, your method, everything should come in the first 2 lines. Once again, ideally, it should come in the first 2 lines. If you give too much of introduction, it will no longer become an abstract. Right? The abstract is simply the gist of what you're doing, and then what you're doing is should be simply understood in the first couple of lines. Okay. Now, followed by that, you should have a major. You will have some findings, right? And then you should write them in the order of their importance or order of your analysis. However you do it is fine. As I said, equally important is the part on policy implications. So it's always advisable that you mention one liner policy implications of your research in the abstract itself, right? So you're not simply doing an exercise, or you're not simply doing some research and then ending it there. So it also gives you it also gives the reader an impression that okay, you have done something, and that this has some value to the larger domain of research. So the abstract is okay. Largely, this would make the abstract, and then keywords and the keywords are equally important. The abstract is never complete without keywords. So that is the other aspect here. So the keywords, we'll talk about what the keywords essentially are, and also particularly for economic students, this would be very common that you need to have the Journal of Economic Literature classification. So in what category within economics, in what category your article would fit into, right? These are some indicators of your indicators of your article where it belongs to, right? So these will obviously ideally you should not have any abbreviations within the abstract, but some people do it. I mean, when you are when you are an established researcher, and when you know the drill, you kind of do it, and then it still gets published, but that's okay. But I would personally say that it's not advised to have abbreviations used in the abstract, or even the title. Okay, or even the title to a larger extent. Okay, so that would be the idea of abstract. We'll come to that formally and after the discussion on title. Fine. Okay. So this would be the last part that you want to look at in terms of writing a manuscript, the title, right? You cannot write a title a priori, to that prior to writing the article itself. I mean, you can of course, but then you'll necessarily that you will, you'll bring out some changes in that. So ideally, the title should have say less than 15 words, or I mean, plus or minus one. If it doesn't matter if it goes to 60, but then it shouldn't be too long. You should ideally have a maximum of 2 parts in the title, one the major title and then the subtitle that you might have. And also the keywords that we've been talking about, should the keywords that appear in the abstract should ideally appear in the title as well. So this is why they are called the keywords, right? The keyword that strike you to the content, the essence of your research, right? So the keywords should be mentioned. The keywords would be mentioned separately. They would be part of the abstract, and they would also help you make the title here. Now, the if your research is, say, novel, if your research is strikingly new, or you're providing some new evidence, right? Or you're using some new method, economic method, research method, or even you're using some different research methodology. All those things can be incorporated in the second part of your title. So this ideally they have to be added, so that this will give the your title is something that catches. It should be something very catchy, right? So the striking elements of the research have to be added in, however you want to design it. Okay, so having said about that, yeah, manuscript, abstract, and the title part. So here we'll look at the abstract and the title part, slightly closely. So I've given my own paper as an example. I mean, why not? I mean, I'm talking about my own research. Okay, so this is one of the recent papers that I published here. So if you look at the abstract here, uh, you would see that the first sentence tells you what is my research on, right? That's what it tells you, the first sentence. Second sentence tells you what I do in terms of filling out that research gap, or how I go about that research. No, up to that 2017 part, 2004 to 2017 would be the first set of it gives you an idea. Okay, I'm doing research on this aspect, and I'm also using certain methods and certain data sets for the, or certain methods, or certain kind of econometric analysis in the second sentence is given. Now, straight I go to, I don't bluff around, I don't beat around my bush. Here I straight go to the results part. I mentioned that, okay, my results are these, and then I finally ended with one liner policy implication. So I'm not saying this is the only way of doing a good abstract, but this would be one successful way of doing it. Now, the keywords, if you look at it on the right side, the keywords would appear in the abstract, as well as most of the keywords would appear in the title as well. Okay, so this is why I said if you stress on these words, they become much more catchier. That's the reason why I said the keywords have to appear separately. They have to appear in the abstract, and they will help you write uh, the title. Fine. I hope this example is uh, at least easy enough. Fine. Okay. Now, coming to the literature review part. Now, going back to the first part that we have been looking at, the literature review that asks you to review the literature, and then also to come up with something that is on your own, something that is essentially that is already not talked about in the literature. So here is what I have done. Once again, this is not the only way, but this is something that I've added one full paragraph on the the what we call as critically analyzing the existing research, and then bringing out what is not there in it. So I say that, okay, our study argues, okay, that's the kind of articulation that you want to make in a research article. So we are arguing something that the literature lacks certain things, and then you are justifying with available, some of the available studies, or the importance of what is lacking, right? Importance of what is lacking with several other studies. And also, if you see the last sentence, I've said that our study fills this gap, right? So your whatever your contribution is has to be, the contribution has to be necessarily have to be notified, and the reader has to see that. This is why I said it should be different from a simple summary, and it should be added with comparing and contrasting with other possible theoretical and empirical literature. And it should also have your own observations of what is lacking. So my research gap would be whatever that is I've mentioned as lacking in the particular literature here. So this is just wanted to show you this example. Okay. All right. Now coming to the, let's say I think the penultimate slide of our presentation is that, so something that I want all of you to understand is that there is something called an extended abstract. I'm pretty sure most of you, I mean, at least some of you would be aware of this. If you have gone to some conferences and all, this would be very important. Now, an extended abstract is, in my understanding, is even tougher than writing an article. Yeah, because only if you have an article, you would be able to write an extended abstract, and it's not just about, say, 100 or even 120 words. It's ideally between 1,000 to 2,000, 2,500 words. Now, sometimes even, for example, the IAFT conference, the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade conference in 2021 last year, they required an extended abstract or a paper to be submitted for consideration. Now, the extended abstract they wanted was for a word limit of 5,000 words. Now, 5,000 words almost makes like 3/4 of a good paper, okay, or even half of a paper. So it's equally important, and then you have to choose between which is important that should be reported in an extended abstract. So it should ideally have a very good title, the same title that you use for the manuscript. It can have introduction, the motivation, and the research gap should be concised in a single section, right? And then also the methodology and the methods that you are using should be briefed and justified. Also, like you do in a manuscript, why you use certain methodologies, why you use certain research methods should be justified, and also your major findings and conclusion, and also the important references, not all references that you would be referring, you have read, only the important references that are relevant to your extended abstract. Now, I would suggest that practice extended, writing extended abstracts. This would be useful for you in conferences. Now, why you would go for conferences is to meet new people, like, get some exposure outside, and also be part of a larger community that works in your area, right? So this would be very useful if you develop a practice of, writing extended abstracts. Okay, so that is more like on the extended abstracts. So these are some of the few tips. So if you are not following it completely, I mean, I'm pretty sure that I'll be sharing the slides with you. You can also have it, look at it later. Now, finally, coming to this, the part that is I deem as most important. The third part is preparing an academic presentation. So the first advice would be that to keep it simple and uniform. What I've done. I've used only I've used it in black and white. So that would be the simplest way of doing it, and would be the plain and the uniform way of doing it. Instead of using it in multicolors, and you can experiment with multicolors in a different context, not in academic presentation, ideally not. Right now, your introduction should always, once again, as I said, introduction should always motivate the research question, and this should, this should give you, like, the introductory slide should give you, okay, so you are going to discuss certain issues in the particular area that you are interested in, and why are you working on it is should be the part of the, that should be the part of the introductory slide. Now, the second slide ideally can be one slide discussion on review of literature. Now, this is another practice that I have seen in research scholars again, that whatever you have written in the paper, you simply copy paste it, or even trim it to some extent, that your entire it looks, your entire academic presentation looks very solid, that it has a lot of information that cannot be read in one go. So it is always better to have one liner catchy points, right? You write, okay, so there is a strand of literature that talks about the relationship between trade and growth, and then you cite a certain some of the studies relating to that. Fine, that would be enough. This kind of 3 or 4 sentences will actually do good literature, and that should also one probably that you can also mention the gap that is the research gap that is there in the in the literature, that you can also mention in that towards the end of that the review of literature slide or the section. Now, once you do that, going to the third one, having said that you establish the research gap, write what is you are going to do, like what's it that you are going to do, your work, your objective, and also it can be followed by a preview of your finding. Okay, now I'll tell you why the preview findings would be important and useful. Now, when you are saying that okay, you've established the research gap, and then you also say that, okay, these are your objectives on the research, and then you can also specify the contribution to your existing literature. Okay, what is your contribution in the existing literature? That has told, as I said, our study fills the gap is what I said in the paper. Now, similar something can be mentioned in the presentation as well, so that your contribution is definite. Your contribution is novel. It's definite. It's it's innovative and it's feasible. It's measurable. All those things will come into that. Now, once you present that, okay, these are your contributions, and then this is the work that these are your research objectives. If it is followed by the preview of findings or preview of your results, the best thing is that the audience, the reader will, or whoever is evaluating you, will understand that, okay, you on the top of the slide you have the research objectives, and the below that you have the findings, right? A simple understanding of what it is given. Number one. So the previous findings will discuss the uh, discuss your result for the first time. That's the number one part. Now, going to the detailed analysis and discussion of your the results, you will repeat the findings once more there. Okay, so once you have the whatever econometric or the detailed research method that you're following, you will also always have a you will always have a discussion of your result, and then that result will be repeated probably for the second time. If you have given the preview of your findings in the one of the earlier slides, you will repeat that in the second section, that is the detailed discussion of your analysis. And then you will also have a concluding section which will have, once again, which will have the major findings and some of the additional findings if there are any, and also some of the policy implications if you talk about. Now, go back to the preview findings once more. You're writing the you're listing out your whatever your findings are in the, say, the third or the fourth slide. Then you are doing it in the penultimate slide, and you are doing it in the final slide. So whatever finding is there, your findings would be almost cemented in the reader's mind. And this is the striking part. If you do this, the preview of findings is always useful, that what your research output is. I mean, ultimately, nobody would want to, nobody would want to evaluate you the kind of, for the kind of econometric method or the data. I mean, not like nobody would want to, but then largely everybody would want to focus on the result or the output that you have from the research. So let it be repeated over time, right? 3 or 4 times, if it is repeated, that will be cemented in the reader's mind or the audience's mind. That would be my personal suggestion on that. And then finally, to conclude this part of academic presentation, ideally to have, if you have a time bound, like say, unlike today's presentation, I have like 1 hour plus or 1.5 hours roughly. I mean, I could take some more time, but then if you have an academic presentation, usually it will be for 15 to 20 minutes, and then keep it as 15 minutes for presentation plus 5 minutes for question answers. So ideally from 15 to 20 slides would be good. And then the best thing would be, once you have the slides, once you have things done, all in your way, do a dry run, practice looking at, keep a time bound, turn the stopwatch on, make your practice on your own, make sure that you're within the time, everything is that can be managed. So yeah, that would be an idea on preparing the academic presentation. So yeah, I think that's more like the end of the session today. I hope it has been useful. Now I'm open to any questions if you have. Thank you. Okay, so okay, before anyone asking, or is there any question coming up, or else I can address the previous question by Mr. Shubham, I think. Okay, fine, all right. Okay, so then Shubham, are you there here, or?
Yes, sir. I'm
Yeah, yeah,
available.
yeah, right. Okay, so your first question was on the research methodology and method, is that right? Or
Yes, sir. I request you to please elaborate on it, please, with example.
okay, with example, research methodology and method with examples. Okay, okay, would be easy if are you a scholar from economics?
No, sir. I am a scholar from media studies.
Okay, well, I'll try my best. Okay, so mm, well, okay, so okay, so suppose you have a research, some research idea in your mind, right? Anything related to your domain largely, and then you have an idea in your mind. Now you want to take a theoretical stand, because without that it would be difficult to follow the research. Now that is the, which theoretical stand you would want to follow is up to you, one thing. And it's also important that the theoretical stand is fitting the research question that you have in your mind. Okay, so I hope I'm at least partially answering your question. Am I?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, yeah, fine. Okay. Now, so suppose in media studies, or anything that you want to look at, I'm trying to think of an example. The way I want to. Okay. So something that comes out to my mind suddenly. So something that happened in University of Hyderabad when I and Mr. Adib were batchmates. So we had a screening of a different interpretation of the Shakespearean drama, The Tempest. So yeah, we had, so the Tempest would be one. Uh, that particular play is something that tells you one story. Now, if suppose you find that there are certain aspects that you feel that are missing. Now there is an interpretation. There is a subaltern interpretation of the Tempest that has later come up. Okay, as I said, I'm just giving you an example. Okay, now the subaltern interpretation or the subaltern theory in which you want to interpret uh, Tempest. So the subaltern study would be your research methodology, or any theory within subaltern study would be your research methodology. Am I clear?
Yes, sir. Sir, is it related to theoretical framework?
Yeah, it is. It certainly is. That's what I was saying. So it's always a theoretical framework or the theoretical standpoint from which you try to explain the research question.
Okay, okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Got it.
Now, how you want to apply the method? Now that is a different thing. Now you have n number of methods available, quantitative or qualitative, whichever it may be. So you can, if you want to make a qualitative kind of an analysis, you can go for primary survey, you can go for descriptive analysis. Everything is, all those things are possible. So they would come under the purview of research method. Now, if you are, it could have
Yes.
been slightly easier if you were if you were an economic student, but that's okay. Because I am also learning the other social sciences and other sciences in humanities. So yeah, so any tool, like, okay, once again, if you so the with the primary survey, suppose you do a primary survey on something, and then you come out with some data, and then you can apply certain set of methods, certain set of tools that will help you arrive at certain conclusions. Okay, arrive at a conclusion that you're expecting, or you're looking for from your research question. Those would be the set of tools. Now, I'm not sure if I made myself clear to you the way that you want it to be understood. But feel free to ask me if there is anything lacking, please.
Qualitative and quantitative thing is clear. I was having that major doubt in that theoretical framework part of it, but that is
Okay,
clear
yeah,
as of now.
yeah, fine. Okay, fine, good. Now, if I recall it correctly, you had some more doubt. You have one more issue. Database and the scope of
Uh,
it. Is that something related to that?
yes, sir. Which I had, that the database and scope of it and how to find that.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's why as I said, the knowing the database and the scope of the database would largely come from your literature, whichever literature that you are looking at. You know, uh, it will largely come from that, because you need to have some source from which you'll have that information flowing in. Now that will be one side of it. Now, knowing the database, for example, just as I said, since I'm a scholar of economics, a student of economics who was working in largely trade related issues. Right? As I said, just as an
Mhm.
example, so I would be looking at databases related to international trade. Now that would be my way of doing
Yeah.
it. Once again, within databases related to international trade, you have multiple possible, multiple sources. Now, as I said, you can look at product level data, you can look at tariffs, You can look at, say, economic integration agreements. So all these will have different types of databases, and there, I mean, certainly there will be some overlapping here and there, but then necessarily they are all standalone databases. Now their scope will also be different depending on the coverage of the product, depending on the coverage of the countries, depending on the coverage of number of years possible. So those will be that is what I said, knowing that this you know it's more like knowing where your data actually is there. Okay, so I want to use certain data, I should know where it is exactly available. That is what I was talking about. I hope it is clear
Okay,
now.
sir.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Yeah, sure, no problem.
No, sir. As of now, it's fine, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Any other questions from the audience? I see a sudden shrink in the uh, in the hall,
Hello,
the
sir.
number of people. Yeah, sure. Who is the?
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Could you introduce
So,
yourself?
sir, I am Sanjeev Das. I am from
Sanjeev Das.
JNU.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
that's more like my name, first name. Yeah. Go ahead,
So,
please.
I'm from JNU.
Okay.
Though I am a student of geography, I am doing my research related to labor market from
Okay.
the geographical perspective.
Okay.
So the query I have that earlier the dataset was regarding the employment and employment scenario. It was NSS, right? NSS,
Okay.
US Employment and Employment Survey.
Yeah.
And it was like the last data set was 2011-12 in 68
Mhm.
round, I think.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But
68.
now the data set has stopped, and a newly formed data set is PLFS, that is Periodic Labor Force Survey, and
Right.
it has started from 2017-18 and it's continuing to publishing the data set.
Yeah.
So if I compare both the data set, as I in my work I wanted to look at the decadal changes of employment and employment scenario in Bengal,
Mm-hmm.
and I've taken the data set of last employment and employment survey NSSO 68 round 11-12 and 2018-19 data set of PLFS. So I'm
Okay.
comparing both the data sets. So how much I mean comfortable to compare the data set, as there is no data set available rather than the PLFS.
Okay. Yeah. I think I understand. So how essentially you're asking how do how do you compare the two databases, like, or the data available between two, say for example, published in two databases for two different periods, right?
Yes.
That's your largely the question. Okay. Now, as I said, yeah. So if we if you recall the section on collection of data, that is the concordance or the compatibility of data, there should be one uh, correspondence. There should be at least one table that corresponds, or that connects between the two databases. Okay, so that is what I said. So for example, now what is from the first table, that is for the first round, the 68th round, if it is say it is um, employment, for example, is categorized as, say, some number, say number like, say, some 62 or something. Okay, and then it is defined in a certain way. Okay, or employment is defined in a particular manner in that particular 68th round. Now this is one possibility. Second one is that, so the PLFS, the survey would have expectedly have a slightly different definition, because my understanding is that there are plenty of changes. It's not a straight change. It's not a direct change from the
Yes, sir.
68th
Yes,
round
sir.
of, yeah. So it's
There are
completely
few
different.
changes regarding the
Yeah,
methodological aspect also.
exactly. So the methodological aspects are different. So which means that the data should not be easily comparable. They cannot be easily compared, to each other. Now, how you do is that, as I said, if employment is, for example, is defined in one way in the 68th round, the NFS survey, and the PLFS survey is, if it is defined in a slightly different way, right? It's the scope of definition can change, or the scope of, say, the coverage of definition can also change. Now, there should be a table. What I'm saying is a practical way of doing it. There should be a table which will tell you the changes in the methodology also. So that correspondent, the concordance of that is something that you have to match. Now, you essentially, how you do it is essentially you have to get two databases and match them, uh, there's no easy way of doing it. I think you have to mask them individually one by one.
Right, right.
Yeah, so that would be, I think that would be the most, I mean, certainly you can use a certain, you can use all, you can always use whatever, Excel or any other software techniques or
Data.
software that could be used. But then I think this is the only way that you can use it. And this is one of the bigger problems that,
Regarding the employment and unemployment survey.
not just employment and
Sir,
unemployment, it is larger, the
one
unit
thing,
level kind of databases.
right, right. As
Yeah.
because after 2011-12, there is no data published by the government regarding the employment and unemployment
Exactly.
thing, and it
Yeah.
is the only PLFS, which is the modified version of the earlier EUS employment and unemployment survey, I think.
Yeah, right.
So we have to depend on that. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you, sir.
See,
Thanks
yeah,
for the
sure.
clarification.
Yeah. I hope you're clear with that now.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I think I see one more name. Uh, Hazding, is that correct? I don't know if I pronounced it correct. Yeah, but please. Um, I see someone's hand raised here.
If you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask.
Well, I'm still waiting. Who is it that who raised the hand?
I think that was a technical error.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We'll
Okay.
wait for anybody else to ask a question if they
Sure.
have.
Yeah.
Are there
Okay.
any more questions?
Yeah, but I would like to ask a question to you all. Now, whatever we discussed so far, when I've tried to cover it in best possible manner, was it useful? I wanted to, ask you this straight away.
Get a feedback.
Okay. Okay.
We'll
Yeah,
get a feedback form soon.
Sure. Okay. Right.
So I think there are no more questions.
Just a second. Do we have any questions here?
Actually, a little funny to see some of my friends, showing some gestures over there. Yeah, I see you.
Take this up. Take this up.
So you take this out.
Just switch on the camera.
Yeah.
Switch off the camera.
Switch off the camera.
Switch off the camera.
Yeah.
Oh, but that was not needed, I guess. Okay. Yeah. Sure. I can't hear you.
Yeah. I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah, I hear you multiple times.
Yeah, I know. So we take this occasion to thank Dr. Sanjeev Vasudevan for hosting us, for introducing at least a few of us who have no clue how data should be incorporated into our academic writing. Most of the suggestions which we have from here talks positively, and they're very happy that you've tried to bring it down as much as possible to make it understandable to all of us. We are extremely happy that you agreed to do this. again, from on behalf of the IIT community and for the GRM organizers. I'm not audible. Yeah, so on behalf of the IIT community and the GRM organizers, we express our gratitude. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So others, we will update about the other two conferences as soon as possible. Participants, how we are going to collect the writing samples will also be intimated through mail. We expect the same level of participation in the upcoming sessions as well. We have Dr. Sangeeta Mang and Ashish Khaka sessions on. Okay, we will update it later. Thank all of you for attending. Good night.
Hello. हेलो हो गई लो 6:40 में समेट दिलस 7:30 का टाइम दिया था हेलो 1.5 घंटा चल रहा यार हाँ हेलो ये कह रहे थे भैया मैं नीरज कुमार सिंह बोल रहा हूँ देवल से
Oh yeah, we are meeting just to say this is the organizing committee meeting available. So our workshop, we will follow the same pattern.